His mom had always been a bit of a monster-in-law and definitely tried to persuade us to name our baby after her, but we said no. She seemed to have absolutely zero boundaries or respect for me as a new mother. She would take my daughter right out of my arms to feed her, but the first time she offered, she disappeared for like 30 minutes, and after that, we were much more hesitant. My baby was not my own in her eyes, and she even bought another house closer to us so she could help whenever we needed. Welcome back to Delve Deck Stories. Today, we are reading some going no contact with family stories. Our first story is from Anonymous, and it's "What's the hardest decision you've ever made?" from the original deck. My dad isn't invited to my wedding because he's a predator. My family had a really hard year, with my aunt being in hospice and slowly fading away each day. Since my grandmother was too old to take care of her, and my fiance and I were the only ones with a home large enough to give her a room with all the necessary requirements, we decided she would come and stay with us and we would look after her until she passed. It was a traumatic experience to begin with, and we had multiple family members constantly in and out of the house as they said their goodbyes or just sat with her throughout the process. My father was obviously over quite a bit, as it was his sister and one he loved very, very much. During one of the weekends that he was staying with us, my little cousin, 15 years old, came up to stay with us as well. We thought nothing of it at all until about 9 p.m. that night when Kelsey knocks on our door and asks if she can come in. Something weird is happening. Brian is texting me weird things. We asked to see her phone, and there we saw messages of Brian trying to convince my fiance's 15-year-old cousin to come and keep him company while he sat with his sister. We thought it was a little weird, but my fiance had the idea to keep texting him to see what his true motivations were. "Why do you want me to come down there? I want to show you something. What is it? It's not something I can say over the phone. I don't think that's a good idea. Be a good girl and come down here." And that was pretty much all we needed to see. I was disgusted at what my dad was doing, what he was saying to a 15-year-old girl, and none of it was acceptable in the slightest. Making it even worse was he was doing it next to his terminally ill sister, who was often unconscious. Jesus. My dad had always been an incredible role model in my life, and to this day, I can't understand where this disgustingness came from within him. I marched downstairs and told him that he needed to leave immediately and he was not welcome back. I knew this meant that I was essentially saying he couldn't see his sister again before she passed, but based on those text messages, he was not there for the right reasons anyway. He protested, but I told him that it wasn't Kelsey texting him back, it was my fiance. The color drained from his face and he didn't say another word. He just kissed his sister on the forehead and left. We did call the police, who uselessly told us that since nothing had happened and the texts weren't super incriminating, that there was nothing they could do.
Shocker.
My wedding rolled around, and when the news dropped that my father had been uninvited, I dealt with grandparents expressing distaste for me and my fiance, and even some refusing to go unless he was welcome. Since it was Kelsey's trauma, and we didn't want to blow up the family with he said, she said drama, especially when the police did nothing to help us hold him accountable, my dad was not at my wedding, nor has he been allowed around since the birth of my first child. I eventually decided that keeping this secret to myself would only allow him to do it to someone else, so I made sure to tell every single person in our immediate and extended family that if they had a child, to stay away from Brian. Incredibly hard to lose the person you thought you knew like that, but I'm glad Kelsey was able to come to us and no one was hurt in irreversible ways that night.
I mean, I feel like she was hurt in irreversible ways. That's your dad. That's so tough.
Yeah, that would be like, I don't even know what I would do. I would be deeply upset.
Not wanting to bring, the girl into this situation and the drama and like re-traumatize her with everyone else. Be like,
like
oh my
prove
God.
it.
Yeah. It's just like, okay, well, if you guys don't want to be here, don't be here. Like, I don't care,
Yeah.
I'm here to protect her. Mm-hmm. And I don't want this guy around who clearly this isn't the first time, that he's probably done something like this. So I'd much rather this be a safe space where this thing didn't happen, especially during my wedding.
And that should be the general
Yeah.
consensus on that. And also, I mean, this is just super. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. Our next story is from Anonymous, and it's what's something you do want advice about from the original deck. My husband's mom went baby crazy and we went no contact. I recently had my first baby with my husband, and we were so excited to have our baby girl Earthside with us. His mom had always been a bit of a monster-in-law and definitely tried to persuade us to name our baby after her, but we said no.
Maybe she said, it'd be really cool if your baby's name was Marlene.
Yeah,
That's a cool name.
all right.
No? Guys?
Yeah, well,
A great name. We have
Yeah.
Marlene who works here. Love
we
them.
do. I wonder if that's where I got it from just now.
During my pregnancy, she was very involved. At first, I thought she was just being caring, wanting to step in since my parents lived on the other side of the country and my husband's family lived about 2 hours away. I didn't find it weird when she would drive the 2 hours to stay a few nights with us every week, and I tried to quell the weird emotions I felt when the baby was born, writing it off as her just taking her grandma duties a little too seriously. I started to realize we might have an issue on our hands when she was adamant about getting the baby baptized at her church, even though my husband and I were not religious at all and had no intention of raising our daughter up to be religious. She basically threw a tantrum and would not speak to my husband until we agreed. And we only agreed because his father came and talked to us. So we figured we could find a compromise for such dedicated parents. Later, she was constantly at the house even when I had told her that I was busy, the baby was down for a nap, or that it just wasn't a good time. She seemed to have absolutely zero boundaries or respect for me as a new mother. And even when we did approve of her coming over for a little bit, she would take my daughter right out of my arms to feed her, would insist on changing all of her diapers, which sure, I didn't hate. But the first time she offered, she disappeared for like 30 minutes. And after that, we were much more hesitant.
She swapped the baby.
She's like,
You lost
I'm
it.
your mother. I'm your mother.
Yeah.
Hypnotized.
She was possessive when other people would hold my baby and only ever let them have her for about 5 minutes before taking her back. You get the picture. My baby was not my own in her eyes, and she even bought another house closer to us so she could help whenever we needed.
You know what would be helpful? If you just took that money, built a trust, and put it in the child's name.
Yes. The final straw for me was when she asked if the baby could call her mama. I absolutely said no. Just be grandma. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised if this grandmother had a little bit of a weird kind of fetish kink with the son.
Okay.
Just saying. It's giving me that kind of
Yeah.
vibe, you know?
No, it's total boy mom
Yeah,
vibes. I absolutely said no, and she threw another tantrum. I told my husband he needed to talk to her and set some boundaries, and he agreed. He informed me that when he went to talk to her about these issues, that not only did she throw a tantrum, but she badmouthed me the entire time, saying I wasn't being loving enough, I was ruining her family, she wished he hadn't had a baby with me, etc.
I think you're right.
She's like, oh, you should have had the baby with me.
She's
No one's good enough for my son.
She sees the wife as a threat.
Mhm.
It's competition. She doesn't get the baby as much as she wants.
Boy moms are a problem. It's weird behavior.
Mhm.
After he told her not to talk about me that way, she claimed he had been corrupted and was no better than I was, stating that the baby would be better with her than us. To me, that sounded like a slight threat of kidnapping.
Yeah.
And my husband and I were both equally weirded out by her behavior. We firmly decided to hold off on letting her come over or interact with our daughter, especially after she made it pretty clear that she felt she was a better parent than either of us, and that didn't have either of us feeling good or safe. My mother-in-law went full stalker. I mean, leaving packages on the porch, showing up to grocery stores I would frequent in hopes of seeing the baby, and constantly calling me an inadequate mother on Facebook to her old-ass friends.
Oh, and I love reading it. You guys, I am in a mom Facebook group just to see what they say.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's fun.
So my husband and I officially decided to go no contact with his side of the family, father included, as he defended my mother-in-law until the baby was a bit older and knew about stranger danger. Yes, she's her grandma, but with the way she was behaving, I simply couldn't trust that she wouldn't abduct our daughter. It's been 3 years since, and I know my husband misses his side of the family, but every time we check in with them, his mom spits vitriol about what a terrible mother I am. So perhaps we'll work in visitations one day, but for now, it's absolutely not in the cards. I feel like a lot of the times when people go no contact with their parents, like frequently kids will be the catalyst for that. Like there is probably warning signs here early on, but it's like once you have your child in the picture,
It's your responsibility to keep them safe.
yeah.
So-
And parents need to respect whatever boundaries, whatever rules, whatever like you have put in place for this child. And I know so many people with kids who have like parents or in-laws who like don't respect the rules that they've set. And it's like, that's their kid. Like, you can't overstep that. Our next story is from Katie, and it's what's the hardest decision you've ever made from the original deck. My husband and I left the Mormon church and cut our families out of our lives.
Both of them. That's pretty impressive.
Good.
That's a lot of deconstructing.
My husband, Cameron, and I met when we were kids. We went to the same school and were both part of the same Mormon church. We became friends very quickly, and our parents would always joke that someday we would get married. We'd both act disgusted by that, but by the time high school came around, there were no other boys I had any interest in, and he felt the same way about other girls, so we started dating. We both went to BYU and were one of the many couples on campus who everyone knew would get married after graduation. Throughout college, we followed the church rules and saved ourselves for marriage. But while some of my friends acted like saving themselves was difficult, we didn't seem to have an issue with it. I wrote it off as both of us just being better Mormons than everyone else. We barely even kissed each other, but we're still best friends and love spending time together. After graduation, Cameron proposed and we got married in the church. On the night of our wedding, we got ready to have sex for the first time. Despite being best friends, it felt incredibly awkward, but whose first time isn't, right? Throughout our first year of marriage, we slept together every few months, which eventually became less awkward, but neither of us felt the need to do it all that much. And since we were so brainwashed by the church, we didn't see this as an issue and truly believed we must be the best Mormons ever. We obviously were resistant to temptation, unlike other people. However, as time passed, I began to get worried that I actually wasn't one of Heavenly Father's favorite disciples. While I was able to resist the temptation of my husband, I seemed to be less able to resist the temptation of fantasizing about women whenever we did sleep together.
Boom! I knew it was going to go there.
I tried to push these thoughts away, like I used to do in high school when I would accidentally check another girl out and have impure thoughts about her. I tried to tell myself that it was normal for the devil to put impure thoughts in our heads, but wished so badly that he would pick something that was less disgusting and evil in the eyes of the church. I continued to ignore these thoughts until one day Cameron came to me and said we needed to talk. He looked like he had been crying.
He's like, I love this other man. He's like, shit, dude, I love this other woman.
I told him that he could tell me anything, and he confessed that he had been having homosexual urges and thoughts about men. He tried to pray for guidance, but said that wasn't enough and that he needed my help. I honestly felt so much relief and love for him in that moment and revealed to him that I had been having the same feelings. It took a few years, lots of therapy, and many difficult conversations for Cameron and I to both come out and accept that we are both gay. Looking back, it makes sense that two queer kids in the church were drawn to each other and became friends. It took even longer for us to decide that in order to live our truth, we would have to leave the church. When we told our families, they called us sinners and told us we would no longer be welcome at home. We knew leaving the church would mean ending our relationships with our families, but we could no longer participate in a religion that demonized us.
I do not understand that.
I feel like there's a lot of organized religions that are like, if you leave the church, you've left your entire family.
I don't.
And that's crazy.
So crazy. Like your flesh and blood, the children you raised up, that you loved, that you mentored. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's what God would want.
Yeah, God would want you to exclude anyone who's different.
I mean,
obviously.
just look at God's track record, you know?
Yeah,
he's always like, I'll smote you, you
Solid
sacrifice them, you do this. He's like, I did have them kill my own son.
Yeah, nowhere in the Bible does he say, love everyone. Certainly not in excess of 52 times.
Leaving the church is one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I'm positive I couldn't have done it without Cameron's help. I feel so grateful he is the man I married rather than some straight guy who probably would have gotten me pregnant and never allowed me to explore who I truly am. Cameron and I are still best friends and still married to each other. However, we practice non-monogamy and have other partners outside of our marriage. Leaving the church opened up a whole new world for us, and we have the best chosen family of other queer, creative, inspirational folks. It's one of the best things I've ever done for myself, but the road there was confusing and painful. But I think, like, your chosen family is better than whatever the church is telling you to do, and that's great. Our next story is from Olivia, and it's what's the hardest decision you've ever made from the original deck. I chose my wife over my parents.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Could be good.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Seems like it.
Her name's Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
Rodrigo?
I'm going to say conservative parents.
Yeah.
Locked it in.
I grew up in a somewhat conservative, waspy family.
I love being right. I'm hardly ever wrong.
My parents are the type to pride themselves on being progressive and open-minded for donating to the National Urban League or Doctors Without Borders, but they are also the type to look sideways at the housekeeper if my mom misplaces a necklace because she assumes the cleaner stole it.
And it really was because Carol was drunk.
Classic.
Carol has undiagnosed ADHD.
I've never heard my parents say anything overtly offensive about gay people, but I didn't feel comfortable coming out as a lesbian until I moved away from home. Once I came out to them, they were falling all over themselves to tell me how proud they were, but it also always felt forced and weird, like they were trying to convince themselves more than they were trying to convince me.
It's like in Get Out where he's like, I would have voted for Obama a third time.
Yeah, it's definitely that vibe.
Yeah,
I have black friends.
Yeah.
I know gay people.
When I started dating my wife, who is biracial, I was really nervous to bring her around. I was worried my parents would let some racist comment slip without even being aware they were being offensive. I finally introduced them about 6 months into our relationship. My parents were all fake smiles and politeness, but I could tell they didn't really approve of her. They didn't say anything at first, but when we got engaged, they basically tried to stage an intervention on me and told me I was ruining my life and that Ayana was from another culture and our marriage would never last.
Yeah, shut the up. Like, you raised your children to be independent, outspoken, reliant individuals, and then you're like shocked when they make a decision outside of what you programmed them. Like, what?
My wife is from Canada and I am from Connecticut, but I wouldn't exactly describe our upbringing as very different cultures. I am sure if I were marrying a white guy from Canada, they wouldn't say anything. My dad suggested I move home for a while if I needed a place to stay. The suggestion was ridiculous. Ayana and I both have great jobs and could easily live apart if we wanted to. My mom told me I'd regret getting married so young and probably get cold feet before the wedding. My wife and I were 29 when we got engaged, so definitely not unusually long.
How old were the parents?
Yeah.
I just want to know, how old were the parents when they got married?
They're
Was it
waspy,
probably
so young 20s.
younger?
Yeah.
So this, you'll regret it because
No.
you're getting married too young?
It's ridiculous. So definitely not unusually young to be getting married. I told them I was firm in my decision and they had to either be supportive or they weren't coming to the wedding. That shut them up for a bit, but after the wedding, the complaining resumed. They don't like that my wife is a vegetarian or that I have become one since we got together. Oh my God, the worst.
That'll happen when you're multiracial.
They don't like that she is a Buddhist, which shouldn't even matter to them. They're Lutherans, but the type that only goes to church on Christmas and Easter. It's not like my wife was trying to convert them. About a year after we got married, they sent me a letter with a bulleted list of reasons I'd ruined my life by marrying Ayana. What?
Oh.
They closed it by saying I should get a divorce before it's too late. They knew we were trying for a baby, and that really freaked them out because they didn't want me stuck with that foreigner forever. Jesus. Parents are like losing their minds here. What are we doing?
Like isolationist or nationalist?
I thought they supported doctors without borders. Hello.
Damn.
I called them and told them I got their letter and found it very offensive. We got in a big argument, and I told them they could either fully accept my wife and our baby, or they could be kicked out of my life. They got defensive and claimed they were just worried about me and wanted what's best. I told them if they made one more rude remark about Ayana or our relationship, I was done. Ayana got pregnant a few months later, and I told my parents they were getting a grandbaby. They did not seem excited and complained that it wouldn't be their real grandchild since it wasn't my biological child.
God.
Some people are so undeserving of breathing air.
I asked, what if I were married to a man and we were infertile and adopted a kid? Would that be a real grandchild? My dad said, that's different. You'd be adopting a child together. It wouldn't be all his child. This is going to be Ayana's baby. You're not going to have any rights to it.
Do these parents think that, like, they're like, yeah, well, because she's a lesbian and she has the baby, that baby's going to come out and be a lesbian? Like,
I think that they think, like,
there's no genetic
rights to it, but I'm like, I don't think that's how this works. I told them to stop calling my child an it, and that I would have legal rights, but they continued to complain. They said the baby wouldn't look like me. They said Ayana might run off with the baby and leave me alone with nothing. They said Ayana would want to raise the baby with her weird New Age religion. It was all insane.
Also, so bold of them to assume that their daughter just completely didn't have any of these conversations with their wife leading up to this.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, but you didn't ask the right questions.
This is giving Parker Posey and that White Lotus family. We don't have to end up in a White Lotus conversation.
I haven't even seen it, and I want to watch.
No! Piper, no!
Piper! Finally, I was like, it sounds to me like you don't want to be part of my family. And that's fine if that's how you feel. But I told you I would not continue to tolerate talk like this, and you refuse to respect this boundary. I don't think there's anything more for us to talk about. They acted like they were the ones being wronged, but I didn't care. I haven't spoken to them since that conversation, and it's been 2 years. They have tried to reach out a few times, but I've ignored them. Send them a bulleted list of why you're not talking to them. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give them more chances to insult us, especially now that we have a young child. The last thing I want is them making insulting comments around our son. I am sad to not have the kind of parents I can have in my life, but I refuse to tolerate any more of their bigotry and insults about my wife or our family. Thankfully, my wife's family is lovely and has fully accepted me as one of their own. We even moved last year to be closer to her parents so they can help us with childcare, and it's been great. My parents will probably never meet their grandson, and it's their loss. He's an awesome kid, and I am sure they would have loved him if they could have gotten over their small-mindedness.
I was just going to say, imagine being so small-minded that, like, you can't even love.
And as a parent, you're like, I hope my children have kids, and I can be grandparents, and we can go to the park, and we can go to the aquarium, and we can go here and do this and all this stuff. And it's like, you just robbed yourself of all of that experience because you couldn't accept that your own daughter and her happiness was married to another woman. They had a kid that wasn't biologically yours, and, you know, followed, again, Buddhism, this New Age religion.
Our last story comes from Melissa, and it's what's something you're still angry about from the original deck. My mom went no contact because I don't want kids.
Wow. So now she has no kids. Mm-hmm. That's insanity.
Yeah. I'm an only child and have always had a close relationship with my mom. Her and my dad had a hard time conceiving and called me their miracle baby, which made me feel special when I was younger. I knew they loved me very much, and we always had a great relationship. My mom has also always talked about how she can't wait to be a grandmother. And being the only child, it's obviously on me to make that happen. When I was younger, I would say, of course I'll have kids. But as I got older, that desire lessened. In my 20s, I watched some of my friends have children, and I realized it actually didn't look like a life I wanted. I had also started dating my now husband, Jared, who was pretty confident he didn't want kids. Maybe if I had met a man who really wanted kids, I would have caved and done it, but being with Jared made me feel even more confident in my decision to not have children. Plus, given the state of the world, I can't imagine bringing a child into this mess. I knew this would break my mother's heart, so I never told her. I figured we would cross that bridge later, and when she would bring up babies, I would just say, oh yeah, we'll do that someday. After Jared and I got married, the baby talk increased. He would tell me that I had to tell my mom we weren't going to have kids at some point, but I was so scared how that conversation would go that I kept avoiding it. A year after we got married, my mom started bringing up how we should be thinking about buying a house soon so we'd have space for all her grandchildren.
Your dogs. All the dogs. The cats, the gerbils, the hamsters, the ferrets, if they're legal.
Yeah. I told her we couldn't afford a house, and she said her and my dad would help with the down payment. In hindsight, I shouldn't have taken the money, but Jared and I really wanted to be homeowners, so I did. I'm now positive she would not have offered if she had known that we never intended on filling the home with children. 2 years passed, and I was still avoiding the baby conversation. Jared was getting more and more frustrated with her comments, and I knew it had to happen soon. Then the opportunity presented itself one evening when we had my parents over for dinner. My mom was getting really pushy about when we were going to have kids and was asking really personal questions about if we were having issues conceiving. I could tell Jared was going to snap soon, so I finally said, Mom, I've been meaning to tell you we aren't going to have kids. She stared at me for a second and finally said, what on earth are you talking about? I repeated myself and she started protesting, telling me I would regret the decision and that she always wanted grandchildren and that I was being selfish. I was getting frustrated and started telling her all the reasons we didn't want to have kids. Global warming, school shootings, and just plain not wanting to.
The housing market.
This argument escalated into my mom calling me a selfish brat. She told me I owed her children because she helped pay for our home.
The irony of calling someone selfish for not giving you something that they don't want. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. You're owed?
Jared didn't like that at all and started yelling back at her, defending me and the decision we had made for our family. Dogs don't count as family, my mom screamed at him.
Now you've done it.
I'll beg to differ.
They're cheaper, they are so sweet, and they teach you unconditional love.
Yeah.
And they die when they get to the teenage age, so honestly, it's like kind of perfect.
My dad tried de-escalating her a few times, but there was nothing he could do. She was livid. The whole thing ended with my mom storming out of our house. She hasn't spoken to me in over a year now and refuses to take my calls. I still talk to my dad, and he says she just needs time to process things. But I don't know how long that is going to be. It breaks my heart because we are always so close, and even though she's mad at me, I want her in my life. I hope she is able to figure things out and speaks to me again someday. But I also know that I can't bring a child into this world just to make my mom happy. It's like a crazy thing to expect from a person. Yeah. Like, you owe me a baby, and if you don't give me one, I'm never talking to you again.
Yeah.
You owe me a baby, or else I won't have a baby. Will you? Yeah, you did that to yourself then.
And
okay.
She probably is like the type of person who's like, my daughter quit speaking to me, or like, so, like you know, there's some like
that's when you just make
logic.
up a line. You go, I can't have children. Looks like it's a genetic thing. You gave it to me.
It's your fault.
Yeah. And be like, we're really trying. Just tell her. Just like, I don't know why you wouldn't just be like, you know, we're having a really hard time. We went to a specialist. They said, you know, we're low count on this and this, and then just be like, oh yeah, we're really trying. It's just not in the cards.
She just wants to be like honest and loved for who she is, though.
Right. But I think at that point, you just like, if you still want the mother involved, I'd be like, screw it. We're trying, but it's not working. And the mother's like, okay.
Piper!
No.
That is it for Delve Deck Stories. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, you can like, subscribe, and check out some of our other videos. And if you have a story you would like to share with us, you can go to share.delvedeck.com and we might read it on an episode.
Bye!